signed here is that people said, oh, you know, where you're going to hell, you know, like they hate, like, that never have a goalies and they go hard on goalies, you know, it's a, like, it's a, like, it's a miserable market for the goalies.
That, of course, was former Flyers goaltender Ilya Bryzgalov, and I'm sure by now most of Philly sports fans understand that the team bought out the remaining option on Bryzgalov's contract, and we'll talk more about those numbers in a second. But first, let's reintroduce you to Gerald Colton, attorney at large, at law, sports agent, who not only represents numerous professional athletes, but also has to deal with contracts ad nauseum. First of all, Gerald, the initial Ilya contract was ridiculous, wasn't it? I mean,
It was pretty jaw-dropping at the time. It was 2 years ago, and it was a big splash in free agency. The Flyers had historically a lot of goaltender issues, really since Ron Hextall last played for the Flyers, and wanted to get that big name out there. The thing that has been interesting is that his agent has said since the Flyers signed him to a contract that at the time had a lot of people scratching their heads, that he had no one else bidding for Bryzgalov's services. So the Flyers, in essence, gave a huge contract, a long term of years, to a guy that no one else was even bidding for, and obviously it didn't necessarily look great at the time, and it's come to be really terrible.
Well, you know, usually it helps when you actually see those numbers right in front of you. We have kind of the breakdown of what was remaining on the contract. The original contract was 9 years, $51 million. The buyout was actually $23 million over the next 14 years. So he's going to get paid even though he's not here. You know, a lot of Flyer fans are like, you know, why are we still playing the guy? It seems like that happens. But you say this is good business.
Well, from a standpoint, look, you can't go back and recreate the history of making a mistake 2 years ago. They've done the best thing they can possibly do. First of all, you get only 2/3 of the remaining amount of dollars on the contract over the course of twice the length of it. So he had 7 years remaining at about $35 million. So he gets 2/3 of that, in essence, about $23 million over now 14 years. That saves them money, even though it's a huge payout. And that was one of the things that troubled teammates this year. He was bragging to teammates. He's going to get bought out. He's going to get all his money, and they'll get signed somewhere else and get even more money. You know, there were a whole lot of things. We will certainly miss his clips and his comments to the media, but otherwise he won't be missed on the ice. But from a standpoint of where they've gone since that time, they signed Ray Emery, who came off a superb year for Chicago, had played here before. The only issues ever with Ray Emery were his commitment, his professionalism, which seems to have been matured now that he's in his 30s. They got him for $1.65 one-year deal. So they get rid of this guy who was a cost of $5.66 per year cap-wise, because the cap is the hit of the total contract is amortized over the length of the contract. So he was going to cost them $5.66 against a shrinking cap if they kept Bryzgalov by buying him out. And all the people who want to complain about getting the money, they should be happy if they're Flyer fans, because they get $5.66 million more in cap. They spent $1.65 on by bringing in Emery. They've got this guy Mason who looked good. Just a win-win.
And by the way, Emery was 17-1 and coming off a Stanley Cup victory. Now, this amnesty compliance thing is something new with the National Football League, and they've given the teams around the league 2 summers to use too. Well, the Flyers used both theirs this summer. The other one, of course, was the buyout of Daniel Briere, which you said made more sense.
Well, it came after the lockout. The NHL had the lockout to start last season. The CBA was reached, and they still salvaged the 48-game season. And in it, the salary cap, based upon the new calculations, is going down. It was about $70 million last year, a little bit over $70 million, to a $64 million this year, about a 10% shrinkage. So what they did, since teams have been operating under an old set of rules, they allow them to buy out these contracts. The players will get 2/3 of their money, but the cap hit gets wiped off. So the Flyers use it to get rid of Bryzgalov, which is a long-term problem.
Sure. And
they also use it on Briere, who Briere had back 6 years ago signed what was then an 8-year, $52 million contract. That was heavily front-loaded.
Well, as you continue to talk about Briere, let's take a look at the full screen, the Briere full screen and the buyout numbers.
Briere, you see, he originally signed an 8-year, $52 million deal 6 years ago. Now he's only owed $5 million left on that deal. So Briere got 47 of his $52 million, because the way they apportioned the payout, he was only going to get $3 million this year and $2 million next. So from a term of actual dollars the Flyers had to give him, spread out over the next 4 years, they had to pay him $3.3 million, $833 a year. So they get a 6.5 cap hit or cap credit by losing Briere, and only pay him $833. That's a great move financially. They slid Vincent Lecavalier, a younger guy, a bigger guy, and only pay him a little bit over. His cap hits about 4.5. So they really did well economically by going from Bryzgalov to Emery, Briere to Lecavalier, and wiping off some big hits on their books.
And his video of Lecavalier, and the interesting thing with Lecavalier, when the Flyers initially did their amnesty compliance deal with Bryzgalov, it was the highest buyout of a contract in NHL history until Lecavalier was let go, and his numbers were ridiculous. 32.7 $6 million over the next 14 years is
Yeah.
what the Lightning are going to be playing him.
He had 7 years left of almost $50 million. So LeCavier left the Tampa Bay with a nice thank you payout that's going to be, he's going to get like $2.5 million a year over the next 14 years just from them. He gets another 4.5 over the next 5 years from the Flyers. So, you know, we don't have to have any parties for Vince LeCavier. And hopefully he comes into the Flyers with some hunger and gets back to the kind of player he was that got that huge contract a few years
Well,
back.
the funny thing is, when I hear you talk, you say only $3 million. Only $3 million to me would be a lot of money. But Gerald Colton, thank you very much for kind of clearing that up and explaining that to us. Andrew Bynum is another show. We'll have you come back for another show when the Sixers continue on. We'll figure out who their head coach is going to be.
Be here anytime. Thanks.
Okay, listen, we're going to take another break. When we return after the break, we'll find out what members of the Temple Owls football team have been doing this offseason. Stick around.